Pricing regulations will go into effect for gasoline on Sunday, and they will boost the price conceivably for gasoline by 3 to 5 cents per gallon within the next week or so. Bad news, of course, for all of us. But our Unit 4 has learned that because of the old rules, we have already been paying a lot more than we should have. This fact turned up during Unit 4's continuing investigation of the oil industry pricing practices. Several weeks ago, Warren Olney told us about alleged price fixing and high-handed methods to squeeze out the competition. Tonight, he has another special report. This one, what might be called gouging at the gas pump. Warren?
John, the idea of price controls was in part to prevent price gouging, charging as much as the traffic will bear when supplies run short and consumers have no choice but to buy whatever's available. But we've learned that federal controls written during the Nixon administration and never changed in the meantime have done just the reverse of what was advertised. Self-serve stations where you pump the gas, wash the windows, and check the oil yourself. They're supposed to charge less than the full-serve stations where somebody else does the work. But since the gasoline shortage this spring, it's more and more common for self-serve stations to charge not less, but more. Some of the first dealers to hit $1 a gallon were self-serve, with the full-serves falling behind. How did that happen? Because of the structure of federal price control regulations. At the very time they're supposed to make prices stay down, they encourage them to go up. Here's how it works. Price controls were designed to freeze profits where they were on May 15, 1973. The Nixon administration thought the wholesale price of gasoline would keep going up, and that's just what it did, right through the Arab oil embargo of 1974 to the present. To keep retail prices from getting out of control, dealers were told they could not charge any more over the wholesale price than they did on May 15, 1973. In most cases, that was 8 to 12 cents, and that margin could not be exceeded, so the maximum allowable price was supposed to go up exactly parallel to the wholesale price. Through the Arab oil embargo, that's just where things stood, but then they changed. Crude oil supplies loosened up. There was more gasoline. Consumers wouldn't pay the maximum allowable, so the real price at the stations went down, and it stayed down till supplies began to run short again in January of this year. That's when some retailers found out about another regulation they hadn't heard of before. It's called banking. All that money the market would not let them charge in the previous years could be called a bank, and here's the kicker. The regulations allowed the bank to be added on now, on top of the so-called maximum allowable price. With gasoline in short supply, drivers had no choice but to pay, and for some dealers with big banks, it was like having no price controls at all. The windfall was biggest for the large self-serve operators. They had kept prices down and made profit with volume when there was plenty of gas. Then this spring, they really cashed in.
During the height of the crisis, I think some of them were charging as high as 15 to 16 cents a gallon. Many of the stations that were charging 99 when everyone else was at 80, some of your chains, they were passing through their bank. I guess the best way to say it is they gave you a discount when you bought the product in 77 and 78. If you go back to buy that product today, you're going to be giving the discount back to them.
Is that still going on?
Yes, it is.
Probably the all-time czar of gasoline price banking is a man named John Roscoe, who runs a chain of 138 short-stop convenience stores in Northern California. At the height of the gasoline shortage, Roscoe got the price of regular and unleaded both all the way up to $1.29 a gallon. When Roscoe got up to $1 a gallon, the Energy Department got suspicious. They told him to lower his price by 20 cents and get down with everyone else. But Roscoe knew about banking, so here's what he did.
We hired Kelly girls to key punch in all the data since May 15th, 1973. We think it came to about 10,000 pages. We had somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 key punch hours alone, and we were able to show exactly where we were and to show that we did have banks somewhere between $4 and $8 million that we'd accumulated since May 73.
So instead of lowering his price 20 cents, as the Energy Department asked him to, Roscoe raised it by 20 cents, and eventually he reached $1.29, all perfectly in accord with department regulations. There was a gasoline shortage, and people paid.
Personally, I kind of like the idea of having regulation because the more the government messes with the business, the better probably we're going to be.
But many stations don't have the sophisticated record-keeping operations of big-time discounters like Roscoe. This is Sam's Arco in Santa Monica.
Well, I didn't check last 6-7 years my books. What was the price? It's not on the wall like a calendar. Just flip over and see what was the price on the 73 or now.
So you mean you don't have the records?
No, I don't have it.
Do the banks favor some stations over others?
They certainly do. The small dealer, those below 40,000 or even 40,000 dealer really is in trouble. He doesn't have a bank in the first place. The self-serve operator that has run lowball prices and made money in the past 3 or 4 years is now the one that, you see that the self-serve operator by and large is above the full-serve operator.
All things the government does are in the name of equity and fairness, and I think that someone wrote a regulation back in 74, 75, which included this chance of recouping money that wasn't made when times were very difficult in the gasoline business. They then very foolishly probably didn't revoke this regulation. And I think most of the people in the business and everyone in the government probably never thought that these regulations would be used.
Banking was part of the regulations written by the Nixon administration during the shortage caused by the Arab oil embargo. But when gasoline became plentiful again, the regulations were almost forgotten. And even the people in charge of enforcing them were surprised at the way they worked out when there was another shortage this spring. Now there's a rush for change. Hearings began only this week here in San Francisco with a promise of action no later than Sunday. So in less than a week, the DOE will change rules that have been in effect for more than 5 years.
But again, it's time to use business judgment. It's time to consider the retailer, the service station dealer, just as any other segment of the community. And he is. And he's there to serve. And he's also there to make a dollar.
Small-time dealers like Sam of Santa Monica will be glad to see the end of the bank since they don't do them any good. Big cut raters like John Roscoe are about to use their banks up, so both kinds of dealers agree with the Energy Department's new regulators that this Nixon holdover should go.
I think there's a very legitimate question to be asked as to whether or not, in effect, what the consumer benefited from by way of reduced prices when gasoline supply is plentiful, he should now have to make up for when the supply is short.
But there's another kicker. The gasoline refiners can have banks too, just like the dealers. In fact, banking seems to have been invented for the major oil companies. Nobody knows how much the dealers have charged consumers through banks, but Robinson says the refiners have collected at least $1.5 billion since the start of the latest gas shortage. And what are the prospects of changing that?
The only thing that we can lawfully deal with at the present time is the retail and wholesale.
John, tonight Robin Growth begins a 5-part series on Hollywood talent agencies. Some of them really can take you to the top, but others, well, they just take you.